Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing an incredible Master League Pokemon that just got even stronger, Lunala. Now, I've never had a Master League Lunala before, but at long last, I was finally able to get the lucky hundo and powered it all the way up to level 50. Lunala was already a Master League meta staple, but now that it can double up on Shadow Balls, an already strong Pokemon just became terrifying. The team I'm using today is a team that was created by Jabaku. It uses Xerneas as the lead, the ever-powerful Lunala as the safe switch, and Reshiram as the closer. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we're off to a tough lead in game number 1, leading Xerneas into Zacian. But I can safe switch into Lunala, and there's basically nothing that neutrally wants to answer a Lunala safe switch, so a lot of the time Zacian's will stay in. Zacian puts up the shield looking to farm up a ton of energy, and I'm always going to be shielding up the Behemoth Blade. I have a pretty significant pacing advantage over Zacian. My opponent is going to be switching out and sending in Kyurem White. Kyurem White will take massive super effective damage from Moonblast. Moonblast lands, in comes Xerneas as they go for the Fusion Flare. Fusion Flare is going to hit Xerneas for neutral damage, but Xerneas is more than happy to absorb that charge attack and get the full farm down. Back in comes Zacian, these Metal Claws adding up quite significantly, but close combat will be getting them very low. Zacian gonna try and commit to the farm down, even at -2 defense. Xerneas stands strong and makes the last second close combat. That forces the final shield from my opponent. I debated a peekaboo play, but I decided I'm just gonna bring in Lunala and go for farm. Lunala puts up the shield as Behemoth Blade comes through. In the back is Primarina, and this Lunala is just such a nuisance for my opponent. Look at that, we rock them with a Shadow Ball. They can't farm down. The threat of another Shadow Ball forces them to throw energy. And this is just going to set up the perfect double-resisted Dragon Breath farm down for Reshiram. In comes Reshiram, getting that perfect farm down, exiting with that Fusion Flare locked and loaded. So despite a terrible lead, Lunala just completely took over that mid-game, and we're able to take the Game 1 win. We move to the next match, leading Xerneas into Zacian once again. Unfortunately, we can't escape the Zacian leads, but this is where that Lunala safe switch is so good. I'm going to look to fire off the Shadow Ball instantly, but I accidentally missed the button. I overtap, and that allows my opponent to throw the Behemoth Blade first and deny my sneak. I'm going to farm up. Opponent tries for a Shadow Ball catch onto Palkia, but they're unsuccessful, and now it's Moonblast time. The coverage on Lunala is just so deadly. I'm farming up past the second Moonblast, and I'm looking to grab that final shield. Moonblast into Palkia is going to land devastating damage. Palkia barely hangs on, but this is only an Aqua Tail. It's not the Spatial Rend. So just like that, I was able to win switch advantage. In comes Xerneas as their final Pokemon, and look at how Lunala can just take over games. This Pokemon is just incredible neutrally. Now I can just bring in my Xerneas, use it as a damage sponge, and close out the game with Reshiram, since Reshiram crushes Zacian. Moonblast lands, in comes their Zacian, and I make a massive misplay. I fire off the close combat. I was thinking that maybe it would do enough damage to put them into farm down range for Reshiram, but it does not. The fact that it's triple resisted Dragon Breaths means I'm going to have a nightmare of a time farming down, and I shouldn't have built up. I should have just switched into the Reshiram instantly. My opponent goes for the Behemoth Blade, not wanting to lower their defense, but that means that I'm still pretty healthy on the Reshiram. Back in comes Xerneas. Xerneas going to be hit now with the Fusion Flare, and my opponent will know there's no way out. It's game over. They no-shield the Xerneas. Back-to-back Zacian leads, back-to-back wins. Tricky lead in the next match, leading Xerneas into Lunala. Lunala, it's very scary neutrally for me, and it's also very scary neutrally for my opponents. Lunala will fire off the Shadow Ball. I'm going to look to return fire with the Moonblast, and then look to switch into the Mirror. Because if I can get up a shield, then suddenly the Mirror feels pretty comfortable. So I switch in my Lunala. These Shadow Claws do so much damage. It's a battle of double super effective damage both ways. I shield up the Shadow Ball. I'm going to look for a farm down. My opponent staying on the field. They think they can get there, and they can. The 1 HP survive. I thought I was farming down, but they knew. They hang on. I get the farm down, but I had to give up both shields, and I really wasn't expecting to have to do that. In comes Zekrom, and Zekrom I don't think is going to like what comes next. Moonblast from Lunala is going to connect. That's devastating damage. I switch into the Reshiram trying to snipe down. The snipe attempt is unsuccessful, and in the back is Xerneas. Xerneas versus the Reshiram is a very neutral matchup. The fact that Reshiram does not take super effective from Fairy is incredibly good in this particular matchup. They fire off the Moonblast, Reshiram able to hang on, make the Fusion Flare, and now my opponent is forced to burn the shield. The good news for me is I have energy on that Lunala, so when my opponent farms me down, I can bring in Lunala and just fire off the Shadow Ball, as I know their switch timer should just not be up. Shadow Ball takes the knockout. All that's left in the back is the Zekrom. It's simply too low. Lunala gets the farm down and takes the win. Great lead in the next match, Xerneas into Palkia. My opponent safe switches into Lunala, and I'm going to stay in with the Xerneas and fire off the Moonblast. Realistically, I don't have a great answer to a Lunala safe switch on this team, and many opposing teams don't have a great response either. That's just kind of how Lunala works. Unless you run a Veltal, which has pretty bad neutrals into most other matchups, you don't really have an answer to Lunala, so a lot of these Masters games just come down to how well you're able to play against your opponent's bat. Here my opponent is going to get aggressive. They save Lunala, they pivot back into the Palkia, and I fire off the Moonblast. Moonblast lands, that's big damage, Shadow Claw just misses the knockout, and Palkia will leave with a parting gift of an Aqua Tail. If my opponent brings back in their Lunala, I'm not going to throw my Shadow Ball. Instead, I'm going to bank it and then farm them down with Reshiram. In comes Lunala, I throw the Shadow Claw, in comes Reshiram. No! They live on 1 HP! Absolute catastrophe! Shadow Ball lands, I lose so much HP on Reshiram, and in the back is Zacian. If I had a full health Reshiram, it's just a free win, but unfortunately, I'm in range where I can actually get knocked out. Zacian will fire off a charge attack here. It is going to be the close combat, so now they're at -2. I have the Shadow Ball, but I still don't think a Shadow Ball would knock out at -2. I'm going to need a close combat into a Shadow Ball. The game comes down to this. Do I combo? Do they predict the combo? They predict the combo, but I just stay on the field. I get the 50-50 call right, and that's going to win me this game. They take the knockout with the close combat, but Lunala, hanging on 1 HP, had that Shadow Ball loaded. Shadow Ball KOs the Zacian, and that's a good game. We move to the next match, and what do you know, Xerneas leads into yet another Zacian. Zacian was by far the most common lead that I saw, and even though it's a really bad lead for Xerneas, this team is so good at turning Zacian leads into wins that after a while, I honestly started to like seeing Zacian leads because I knew there was a high chance I was probably going to win the game. Lunala gets big damage onto Zacian. My opponent's now going to respond with a Dragon Tail Palkia. I don't think that Dragon Tail is the correct move to go for on Palkia. Dragon Tail and Dragon Breath have the exact same parameters. But obviously, if you have the choice to run the 1-turn fast move, you should always run the 1-turn fast move because you have way better flexibility. Here, I'm able to bank close to 100 Lunala energy, pivot back into the Xerneas, and then Xerneas is just absolutely crushing Palkia with Geomancies. There's the switch out into the Zacian, but I already have back-to-back close combats locked and loaded. Close combat number 1 is going to be shielded. I'm just going to under-tap, and this way, if my opponent double shields, then I can snipe them with Lunala. They do double shield, back in comes Lunala, and Lunala's neutrality is just incredible. Down goes the Zacian in the back. They have Ho-Oh, and Lunala's not done. Firing off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball will inflict big damage onto the Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is going to switch out, sniping down with the Palkia, but I can bring in the Xerneas. They can never farm me down. They're forced to throw energy, and I can close out the game with Reshiram. In comes Reshiram. Reshiram gets that Dragon Breath farm down. Back in comes the Ho-Oh, and Ho-Oh, they can't one-shot here. A Brave Bird just simply does not knock out, so I no-shield, Brave Bird lands, and we're able to make it to the Fusion Flare. I think I actually got the Stone Edge as well, but they debuff their defense. Fusion Flare will be all that's needed to take home this win. Hopping into the next match, leading Xerneas into Zekrom, an incredibly good lead. My opponent should look to pivot out of this matchup, and they do. In comes Lunala. Lunala, it appears my opponents have also realized, is an amazingly flexible safe switch. Lunala going to be met with the Moonblast. The shield comes up. Lunala actually going to overfarm massively. The fact that they're holding all of this residual energy makes it a lot more difficult for me to bring in my own Lunala. So I'm just going to stay on the field. My opponent chooses not to throw, and now they're going to be hit with big damage or have to give up their final shield. They no shield. I bring in my Lunala, hoping for the snipe, but they're able to react in time, and at bare minimum, grab a shield. So now, it's even shields, but I have a small energy head start over this Zekrom. Zekrom ends up throwing on what would have been a CMP tie to the Moonblast. I have to respect the potential crunch, but it is going to be the Fusion Bolt. I farm up just shy of 100, and I'm not baiting. I'm full sending here, going for the Moonblast. Moonblast into the Zekrom does get shielded. Zekrom is going to outpace, and I make a catch, catching the Fusion Bolt onto my Reshiram. Reshiram, gonna absorb that damage, no problem, but when my opponent stays in, suddenly I am a little bit worried that I could have needed this Reshiram for what's in the back. Zekrom fires off the Fusion Bolt. I intentionally wait a turn there to let a Dragon Breath land, and then I fire off the Fusion Flare. Fusion Flare will take the KO. In the back is Zamazenta, and I needed this Reshiram. Without Reshiram, I'm going to need a catch. My opponent will be able to outpace me here by 2 turns. So it all comes down to this. Do we get the catch? We go for the catch, and we do get it. So a close game, a bit of a misplay by me to throw away Reshiram, but with a catch, we're able to claw our way back and secure the win. Great lead in the next match, Xerneas into Palkia. My opponent safe switches into Lunala, and again, this is going to be a bit of a test for our line. A great lead, but Lunala on the safe swap is just too scary. They fire off the Shadow Ball. Them throwing early honestly works better for me because now I feel a lot more comfortable after firing off the Moonblast, sending in my own Lunala. I can't quite get a one-shield farm down here. My opponent is too healthy, but I will be able to fire off the Shadow Ball right before my opponent is able to make their second move. So I will look for the overfarm, firing off the Shadow Ball, but they make a spectacular catch, catching the Shadow Ball back onto the Palkia. Palkia more than happy to absorb that damage. The good news is with my new pacing, I'm able to get to a second Shadow Ball 1 turn before their Aqua Tail. Shadow Ball will force the shield. My opponent does not have a lot of fastball pressure here. They're forced to throw a move, and once they Aqua Tail me, I can just bring in the Xerneas, force him to throw again, and Reshiram is set up to sweep. The thing I have to keep in mind is my opponent should be 1 Shadow Claw off of a move on the bat. In the back, there it is. There is Zacian. And this is the reason why I don't like bringing in Reshiram into Lunala, because Reshiram is often very good in the back against Palkia leads. Fusion Flare is going to land. Even if they close combat, it won't knock out. I can just let it go, make another move, and farm everything else down. And I think my opponent knows it. They just don't throw their charge attack. Everything's getting farmed down, and they will resign the match. Tough lead in the next match, Xerneas into Zacian. Lunala safe switch, hard punished with a Veltal, and this is off to a very rough start. This is the first time safe switching Lunala many games that have been met with a Veltal, and unfortunately, I'm just getting fully farmed down. Moonblast would have done big damage if it landed, but now my opponent is just at such a massive energy head start that a Veltal can kind of run away with this game. My biggest complaint about using a Veltal when I used it was the fact that its pacing is really bad. So if it's not in an energy advantage situation like it is here, it really feels like a liability. But in this game, it's completely taking over because of that massive energy head start of farming down Lunala. Moonblast takes the knockout, in comes Reshiram. At this point, I know my opponent has a dragon in the back, which means if I shield close combat, I lose, and if I no shield close combat, I also lose. Their final Pokemon is revealed to be Zekrom, so if I shielded the close combat to preserve HP, then I was just getting KO'd by an Outrage. And if I no shielded, which is what I did, then I just get Dragon Breath down. So unfortunately, there's just no way out for me in this one. I'm going to be shielding, playing to the absolute last second. My opponent goes for a bit of a bad manners Outrage there, but realistically, I just can't win this game, unfortunately. I feel like every game so far with this team was winnable, but unfortunately, this was the first that was not. Tough lead again in the next match. This time, Xerneas leads into the other dog, Zamazenta. Once again, Lunala safe switch, this time going to be answered with Eternatus. Eternatus is able to spam out Dynamax cannons pretty quickly with the Dragon Tail rework, but Lunala has enough bulk that Dynamax cannon neutrally is honestly not a particularly threatening move. Dynamax cannon lands, I return fire with the Shadow Ball, and I'm able to make it to Shadow Ball number 2. I'm expecting my opponent to throw 1 and then the Dynamax cannon, so I'm going to go for the catch. Switch into Xerneas, but they don't throw their energy, and unfortunately now I'm getting Flamethrower. That would have been a very flashy catch. Unfortunately, it does not pay off, and now back in comes Zamazenta. But the good news for me is Zamazenta is going to take big super effective damage from close combat. And if I fire off this close combat on alignment, I can now force a shield from my opponent, or they lose all of their energy. They will put up the shield, and they actually end up throwing energy. They could have farmed down, but at this point, I have a 2-0 shield Reshiram, so I should be in the driver's seat of this game. In comes Lunala just to force them to throw energy because the Ice Fangs were not doing enough. There's the Behemoth Bash, and now in comes Reshiram. Reshiram going to be met in the back with Dialga, and I'm going to get to farm up to the back-to-back Fusion Flares. Fusion Flare only hits for neutral damage, but back-to-back Fusion Flares definitely going to be enough. So Fusion Flare number 1 lands, immediately followed by Fusion Flare number 2. That's going to be knocking out Dialga. In comes Zamazenta. They get farmed down. All that's left in the back is the Eternatus, and that's a good game. We move to the final match, and unfortunately, it's going to be a tough one, leading Xerneas into Ho-Oh. But if there's one thing this team does very well, it's starting the game with a bad lead and winning anyway. So I save switch Lunala, shield the Brave Bird, and out comes Dialga. Dialga, a lot spammier now with the Dragon Breath rework, but they're going to take big damage from Shadow Ball. This new pacing is just so good on Lunala. I'm able to get to another Shadow Ball. Unfortunately, my opponent will outpace me here. So I am going to farm up. Switch Clock will be up soon. My opponent tries the CMP tie, and I catch the Iron Head back onto Xerneas. Oh, they actually went for the Roar of Time. I was expecting them to Iron Head. I assumed Iron Head would have been enough, but my opponent ends up going for the Roar of Time. I'm not quite sure the damage range is there, so that ends up being a way cooler catch than I ever intended. I wanted to catch the Iron Head because it would have actually limited farm, but since Roar of Time did no damage, now my opponent's actually forced to throw. Sacred Fire is going to take the knockout. I still have Lunala, but it's Reshiram time. Reshiram's going to have to go for a one shield farm down. Having no shields for the endgame is a bit scary, but considering they have Ho-Oh lead, they have to have a hard check to Palkia in the back. That means Xerneas or Zacian. They reveal it's Xerneas, and things are looking good. I have a Shadow Ball loaded on Lunala. I'm going to get back-to-back Fusion Flares on the Reshiram, so I should be good to switch in Lunala, combo with the Shadow Ball, and take the win. I switch Lunala. Oh my goodness, but I didn't hit the button in time. That triggers a Shadow Claw. They CMP me with an Iron Head, but the good news is, even with that catastrophic misplay, we're still going to get the win because Reshiram gets a farm down, exits with a ton of energy, Fusion Flare takes the knockout, and that's a good game. All in all, now that I finally have a maxed out level 50 Lunala, oh my goodness, this Pokemon is absolutely incredible. And to me, it's a must-use this season of the Master League. Lunala was already very strong, but with the Dragon Breath rework, it was a little bit limited because suddenly Palkia had a lot more win conditions into it. But now, with the Spacer Red nerf, Palkia getting slightly worse pacing, and with Lunala getting better pacing, it feels like a switch was flipped, and Lunala is back to being an absolute god-tier safe swap. Honestly, whether you use it as a closer, as a lead, or as a safe swap, Lunala is basically good everywhere. I do think that it leads to some very fun, very dynamic battles as trainers really try and mitigate the opponent's Lunala from doing damage and try and get as much value out of their own. So I really like this season's Master League. I really didn't like last season. I felt like last season there ended up being a lot more alignment-based gameplay, whereas this season it feels like things overall are a lot more flexible. And for me, I am a very big fan of that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. Thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.